There is an old pattern that shows up again and again in human relationships, and it puzzles a lot of people when they first notice it. A woman meets a man who is kind, who texts back quickly, who makes it clear he likes her, who plans dates and shows up on time and tells her how much he wants to be with her. And instead of feeling relaxed and happy, she feels a little bored. Then she meets another man. This one is busy. He does not reply right away. He does not say much about his feelings. He seems to be doing fine whether she is around or not. And suddenly she is thinking about him all day, replaying their conversation, wondering what he meant by that one short message. This pattern is so common that it has become a cliché, but clichés exist because they point at something true. Understanding why this happens is not about blaming women or saying something is wrong with them. It is about understanding how human attraction actually works, which is often very different from how we wish it worked. The first thing to understand is that attraction and comfort are not the same feeling, and they do not always come from the same source. Comfort comes from safety, predictability, and warmth. Attraction, especially the early spark of it, comes from uncertainty, tension, and the sense that something has to be earned. This is not a flaw unique to women. Men experience the same pull toward people who are harder to read. But because of how dating culture has developed, and because men are often the ones expected to pursue, this dynamic becomes very visible in the way women respond to men who seem independent and unbothered. When a man does not need a woman's approval to feel good about himself, he becomes, without trying, a kind of puzzle. And human beings, all of us, are drawn to puzzles more than we are drawn to open books. Think about it from a simple evolutionary angle first, because that is often where this conversation starts, even if it is not the whole story. For most of human history, resources were scarce and survival was not guaranteed. A man who could take care of himself, who had status among other men, who was not desperate for a partner because his life was already stable, was signaling something important. He was signaling that he had the skills, the confidence, and the social standing to be a good provider and protector. A man who needed a woman badly, who seemed anxious and clingy from the very first meeting, was often signaling the opposite, that he lacked the resources or the confidence to stand on his own. Whether or not this reasoning was ever consciously worked out by anyone, the emotional wiring that resulted from thousands of years of this pattern did not disappear just because modern life looks completely different now. Even today, when a woman does not need a man to survive, some part of her brain still reads confidence and self-sufficiency as safety, and reads neediness as a warning sign. But biology is only one layer of this. Psychology adds another layer that is just as important, maybe more important in the modern world. Human beings, in general, place higher value on things that are harder to get. This is not unique to romance. It is true of job offers, of friendships, of luxury goods, of opportunities of every kind. If something is freely available with no effort, our brains quietly file it under not very special. If something requires effort, patience, or the risk of rejection, our brains file it under valuable, worth chasing. A man who does not need a woman, who has his own friends, his own goals, his own sense of self-worth that does not collapse the moment she seems distant, is a man who cannot be won without effort. And so, without even meaning to, he becomes valuable in her mind. Not because he is playing games, not because he is cold on purpose, but simply because his life does not orbit around her. That fact alone creates a kind of gravity. Now compare this to the man who needs her. Neediness is not the same as kindness, and this is a distinction that gets lost very often. A kind man can also be secure. A needy man, even if he has good intentions, sends out a different emotional signal. His mood depends on her replies. His sense of self depends on her approval. He asks for reassurance often, sometimes without saying it directly, through small behaviors like double texting, checking in too often, or getting quietly upset when she takes a few hours to respond. When a woman senses this neediness, even if she likes the man as a person, something in her starts to feel uneasy. It is not that she consciously thinks this man is too invested. It is more that she starts to feel responsible for his emotional state, and that responsibility feels heavy rather than romantic. Attraction tends to shrink under the weight of obligation. Desire wants freedom, not duty. There is also a deeper psychological need at play here, one that has to do with self-worth rather than simple biology or social conditioning. Many people, not only women, chase those who are hard to reach because being chosen by someone who has options and who does not appear to need anyone else feels like proof of their own value. If a man who could have almost any woman chooses to spend his time with her, that choice feels meaningful. It feels earned. On the other hand, if a man who is desperate for any kind of attention shows interest in her, that interest does not feel like proof of anything. because it seems like he would have shown the same interest to almost anyone who gave him a chance. In other words, the value of attention is judged not just by how much attention is given, but by how selective the person giving it seems to be. A man who does not need her, who could walk away and be fine, makes his attention feel selective and therefore precious. A man who clearly needs her makes his attention feel automatic and therefore less special. This is closely tied to something psychologists call variable reward, a concept borrowed from behavioral science but very relevant to relationships. When a reward, whether it is attention, affection, or a compliment, comes in a predictable and constant stream, the brain gets used to it and stops releasing much excitement over it. But when a reward comes unpredictably, sometimes warm, sometimes distant, sometimes present, sometimes absent, the brain becomes much more engaged trying to figure out the pattern. This is the same mechanism that makes slot machines addictive and social media notifications compelling. A man who is emotionally consistent and always available removes this uncertainty, and while that consistency is genuinely valuable for a long-term healthy relationship, in the early stages of attraction it can feel flat compared to the unpredictable, occasionally distant behavior of a man who does not need her. This does not mean unpredictability is good for love. It means the human brain responds to unpredictability with heightened attention, which can easily be mistaken for deeper feelings. There is another layer worth mentioning, and it has to do with self-esteem and the stories people tell themselves about their own worth. Some women who repeatedly chase emotionally unavailable or self-sufficient men are not simply reacting to biology or reward patterns. They may be replaying an old emotional pattern from earlier in life, often connected to a parent or early caregiver who was also emotionally distant or hard to please. When love in childhood felt conditional, something that had to be earned through good behavior or achievement, a person can grow up associating love with effort and striving rather than with ease and safety. As adults, they may unconsciously seek out partners who recreate that same feeling of having to work for affection, because on some level it feels familiar, even if it does not feel good. This is not true for every woman who is drawn to self-sufficient men, but it is a real and well-documented pattern in relationship psychology, and it explains why some people keep chasing the same type of emotionally unavailable partner again and again, even after being hurt by it before. Social conditioning plays its own significant role too. Popular culture, from novels to films to song lyrics, has spent generations glamorizing the idea of the aloof, mysterious man who cannot be tamed, and the woman who finally wins his heart through patience and persistence. This story gets told so often that it starts to feel like the template for real romance. Women grow up absorbing the idea that a hard-to-reach man is more romantic, more desirable, more worth pursuing, precisely because that is the story arc they have seen rewarded again and again in fiction. Meanwhile, the emotionally available, easygoing man rarely gets the lead role in these stories. He is often cast as the reliable friend, the safe but boring option, someone to end up with only after the more exciting chase has ended. These cultural scripts shape expectations in ways that are hard to notice because they feel like personal taste rather than learned patterns. It is also worth being honest about the role that low self-esteem can play, not just in early life but in the present moment. When someone does not fully believe they are worthy of love, they can find genuine affection suspicious rather than comforting. A man who clearly and openly needs her, who tells her early and often how much he likes her, can trigger a quiet internal question. If he likes me this much this fast, what does that say about his standards? This thought is rarely spoken out loud, and often the woman herself is not fully aware she is thinking it, but it can quietly undercut attraction toward men who are emotionally open and available. In contrast, a man who does not need her and takes his time to show interest does not trigger this suspicion, because his slower, more measured interest seems to confirm that he has standards, and therefore that being chosen by him means something. None of this means that women, as a group, are irrational or that this pattern is universal or permanent for every single person. Many women, especially as they grow older and gain more life experience, deliberately unlearn this pattern once they recognize it. They come to understand that the excitement of chasing someone unavailable is not the same thing as real compatibility or lasting love, and they consciously choose to build relationships with people who are both secure in themselves and genuinely available emotionally. This shift usually comes with self-awareness, sometimes through failed relationships that taught hard lessons, sometimes through therapy or reading and reflection, and sometimes simply through the process of growing more confident in oneself over time. As a woman becomes more secure in her own worth, she becomes less dependent on external proof, like a hard-to-get man's attention, to feel valuable. At that point, calm and consistent affection starts to feel like a gift rather than a warning sign. It is also important to say clearly that a man not needing a woman is very different from a man being cold, dismissive, or emotionally unavailable on purpose as a manipulation tactic. There is a meaningful difference between genuine self-sufficiency, where a man has built a full life, has friends, purpose, and confidence, and simply happens to be secure enough not to be desperate, versus a calculated strategy of playing hard to get in order to manipulate someone's emotions. The first is healthy and attractive because it is authentic. The second is a game, and while it can work in the short term because it exploits the same psychological patterns described above, it usually does not lead anywhere good, because a relationship built on strategic distance rather than genuine connection tends to be unstable and ultimately unsatisfying for both people involved. There is also a flip side worth mentioning honestly. The same women who are drawn to self-sufficient men are often, once they are in a committed relationship, deeply loyal, caring, and generous partners. The chase dynamic tends to be strongest in the early, uncertain stage of attraction, before real emotional intimacy has been built. Once trust and closeness develop, most people, women included, come to deeply value consistency, honesty, and emotional availability in their partner. The early pull toward mystery and unavailability is largely a function of uncertainty itself, and uncertainty naturally fades as two people get to know each other. This is one reason why some relationships that begin with intense early chemistry, built on one partner being hard to reach, later struggle once the mystery wears off and both people are left facing the reality of who the other person actually is underneath the intrigue. Understanding this pattern is useful for anyone, regardless of gender, who wants healthier relationships. For men, the lesson is not to become cold or distant on purpose as a manipulation tactic, but rather to build genuine confidence and a full life outside of any one relationship, because that authentic self-sufficiency is naturally attractive, while manufactured distance tends to feel hollow and eventually gets noticed as fake. For women who recognize this pattern in themselves, the lesson is to pay attention to whether they are drawn to a person because of real compatibility and shared values, or simply because that person is hard to reach and therefore feels exciting. Learning to sit with the discomfort of calm, steady affection, rather than mistaking that calm for boredom, is often the real work involved in building a lasting and healthy relationship. In the end, the pattern of being drawn toward those who seem not to need us says less about any flaw in character and more about how deeply wired the human brain is to value scarcity, to seek proof of worth through effort, and to associate love with the very same uncertainty that once, in a much harder and more dangerous world, helped our ancestors choose partners who could survive and thrive on their own. Recognizing this pattern does not mean a person has to be ruled by it forever. Awareness itself is often the first and most important step toward choosing partners based on real connection rather than the ancient, instinctive pull toward whoever seems hardest to win.